Hey everyone, this is Kenneth the K-Rock Klein coming to you with an emergency broadcast, or I should say emergency podcast of episode 47 of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock. And folks, I was not planning on doing a podcast immediately in the near week because I got a lot of things going on this week. We got a couple of basketball games at Lamar University that I need to tend to, but there was some breaking news that happened today regarding the NFL, and it involved the situation with Azeez Al-Shair of the Houston Texans, and I'm going to get to that in just a moment, but I did talk about that previously, and there was some breaking news that took place now, so I'm going to get right into that in just a moment, but before we do, again, folks, if you want to listen to this podcast of mine, go to my YouTube channel, KWCLINE91, along with Podbean and Spotify. That's where you can find it from a video perspective, but also from the listening perspective, and if you just want to listen to the audio portion of it. So, again, I hope you guys don't mind that I come out with a quick podcast here, because, folks, we got some breaking news to get into. And this involves Azeez Al-Shair, who, for those of you that don't know, got himself in some massive trouble in the NFL on Sunday in the win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. Al-Shair provided a big controversial hit on Trevor Lawrence, which you can look at in multiple ways. It was egregious, it was dirty, and it was consequential, and you knew right away that he was going to be suspended. But more involving that situation was the fact that he set off a brawl. It wasn't him that started it, but he sort of escalated it in that particular moment. And then just the way he behaved when he didn't react to being ejected from the game immediately, and just the sheer frustration, you knew that he was going to be suspended and fined by the NFL. It was just a matter of how many games was it going to be. Now, on my last episode, which I posted today, this is episode 47, but on episode 46, which was released today, I talked about that, and I gave out my thoughts on what I thought should be the right punishment. And I said, at best, at least a 2-game suspension, given the circumstances and of the things that he had done in the past, and also that the NFL needed to make a statement, even though it didn't necessarily appear to be the most intentional violent hit. It was egregious when you looked at it as well. Well, today, the NFL came out with its punishment, and Azeez Al-Shair has been suspended for 3 games without pay. And it's kind of not what I was kind of expecting, because in all honesty, even though it looked really bad, this was a suspension that I think 3 games was just too much. And I don't necessarily believe that he should have been suspended for that amount of time. Now, of course, I say that because the Texans are playing the Miami Dolphins, the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Baltimore Ravens over the course of 3 games and 3 days for that matter. And I got to tell you what, I was very disappointed to hear that. I mean, I knew he was going to be suspended. I just didn't think it was going to be that much. I'm kind of glad it wasn't the rest of the season, because he's been a big part of the Texans organization and everything ever since he got here from a defensive perspective. But his absence is definitely going to be one that is going to be very talked about as well. Now, you know, the whole thing with the suspension, it's one thing, but there was one thing that really bothered me, and this involves the press release that the NFL had given out. So, given it out today, the NFL Vice President of Football Operations, John Runyan, issued the suspension. He wrote a letter to Runyan, or to Al-Shair, and said that he has had multiple offenses for personal fouls and sportsmanship-related rules violations in recent seasons. And then this is what he wrote in this letter. He said, during your game against the Jacksonville Jaguars on December 1st, with 4:20 remaining in the second quarter, you were involved in a play that league considers unacceptable and a serious violation of the playing rules. Video shows you striking the head neck area of Jaguars quarterback Trevor Lawrence after he clearly goes down with a feet-first slide, You led with your forearm and helmet and delivered a forceful blow to the head and neck area of your opponent when you had time to space to avoid such contact. After the illegal hit, you proceeded to engage in a brawl, which you escalated when you pulled an opponent down to the ground by his face mask. After the referee announced that you were disqualified for the hit and your unsportsmanlike acts, you removed your helmet and re-engaged with your opponent while walking down and across the field, which started another physical confrontation near the end zone. Your lack of sportsmanship and respect for the game of football and all those who play, coach, and enjoy watching it is troubling and does not reflect the core values of the NFL. Your continued disregard for the NFL playing rules puts the health and safety of both you and your opponents in jeopardy and will not be tolerated. Okay. I get it. They obviously have to make a statement. The NFL does. They have to make a statement regarding the whole situation because clearly what Al-Shair did was inexcusable no matter how you look at it. It was wrong, and he has apologized. And he should feel remorseful about the whole matter. But this is what really bothers me. I look at this last paragraph. Your lack of sportsmanship and respect for the game of football and all those who play, coach, and enjoy watching it is troubling and does not reflect the core values of the NFL. Your continued disregard for the NFL playing rules puts the health and safety of both you and your opponents in jeopardy and will not be tolerated. Now, okay, lack of sportsmanship and respect for the game of football. You're telling me that he doesn't respect the game of football? You're telling me he doesn't have any sportsmanship? Now, I get it. He has had some questionable moments. He has done some things that are inexcusable. This is probably the most egregious thing he's done in his time there. And you can talk about all the penalties and the fines that he has gotten in the past, and I'm sure that's what led the NFL to consider making it 3 games initially. But to say that Al-Shair has a lack of respect for the game of football, that's not personal. That's not a professional statement. That is a personal attack on Al-Shair. To say that he has no respect for the game is ridiculous. If he didn't have respect for the game of football, he would not even be playing in the NFL. But the fact that you decide to go out of your way and say that, man, that's insane. And let me put it this way. Let's get this out of the way. Jon Runyan, the NFL Vice President of Football Operations, who issued the suspension. Make no mistake, folks. Jon Runyan, a former offensive lineman, he was no saint either. He was no saint. This guy was one of the dirtiest players in the history of the NFL. I mean, there is a video clip going around that is showing Jon Runyan when he was playing, basically flying, giving a flying headbutt to one of the defenders. I mean, it's ridiculous. It is absolutely insane. And this is the same guy that has decided to give Al-Shair a suspension. Like, I'm watching this right now. He basically, during a game against the 49ers, Runyan, playing for the Eagles, does a flying headbutt, something that was an illegal wrestling move, if you were a fan of the WWE. He basically does a flying headbutt, and I don't know if he got fined or suspended for it. He probably got fined back in those days, but for him to say that Al-Shair has no respect for the game or no integrity in a way, I'm sorry. In spite of all the issues that Al-Shair has had in the past, I'm going to be real honest. Jon Runyan was a dirtier player than, Al-Shair. And we're talking about someone that is apparently gotten a big job. So let me get this straight. You fly into someone doing a headbutt, you are going to get an administrative job with the NFL. I don't know if this was a case where you had to have a come to Jesus meeting where you needed to repent for your sins of all the times in the NFL and you just are being rewarded for this. But oh my gosh, I am shocked at that statement. That is not a professional statement. That is a personal attack. And if I were Al-Shair, I would be pissed off at that statement. And needless to say, I'm not the only one who feels that way, because the Texans organization has defended Al-Shair. DeMeco Ryans had a statement yesterday basically talking about, what a player Al-Shair was, and, that he's not that person as well. But I got to give props to General Manager Nick Caserio, because he had a press conference this morning talking about the suspension, and he basically called out the NFL for what he believes are inconsistencies when it comes to disappointing players for massive hits like the one that we just saw on Sunday. And I got to tell you what, I heard this press conference, I heard his rant, and he was spot on at this point. So I'm not going to play you the entire rant, but I'm going to play you some of the things that has been said, that was said in this rant. But again, it's definitely one of the most interesting rants, and this is what he had to say.
Situations, multiple examples. All right, two really good players, I would say. Bryant ejected against Green Bay.
He's going over the situations in previous years where players have gotten disciplined, but not in the way Al-Shair has for the hit as well. So this is some of the examples he gives out.
Right? Plays the next week against us. Okay, Derwin ejected. All right, got suspended for one game. And Derwin's a great player. Derwin's had some other situations that have come up. And I'd say even going back here, a player that we know well organizationally here, Kareem Jackson. Kareem's a good player. Was ejected, fined, ejected, and then suspended after 3 games. So we're going to say Azeez Al-Shair, who nobody embodies our program more than Azeez. What he's about, what he's been through. You all know his story. There's not a more selfless individual, more about the team, who's earned the respects, that represents everything that we want this program to be about. I mean, this morning he was at a United Way event. So we're talking about some of the commentary that has been made about his character, about the person that he is, about what his intentions are, from people that, quite frankly, don't know anything about Azeez Al-Shair, okay? And for the league to make some of the commentary that he made about lack of sportsmanship, lack of coachability, lack of paying attention to the rules, quite frankly, it's embarrassing. So I think the big thing from and they talk about a player who's never been suspended, never been ejected. So now we're saying that he's going to be suspended for 3 games. So, look, it is what it is. I think the big thing from our standpoint, and all teams want this, is just some level of consistency. And we've talked to the league, quite frankly, but we don't have a good explanation. DeMeco talked to them yesterday. So, I mean, it is what it is. I'm sure Azeez will go through whatever process he's going to go through, and then we'll deal with it accordingly. But I think what we take umbrage is just the picture that's been painted about Azeez, his intentions, who he is as a person. I mean, quite frankly, it's bullshit. And it's unfair to the individual. It's unfair to the organization. I mean, we love everything about Azeez Al-Shair, what he means to this team, what he brings to this team. He was elected a captain after being here for 4 months. So, again, we have a lot of respect for our opponents. We have a lot of respect for other teams in this league. We want to do things the right way.
Yeah, and you can clearly tell that he is very upset and very angry over the fact that Al-Shair got suspended for 3 games when, other players have been suspended for a game or 2. And I look, I totally agree, because I feel like the NFL, as much as they are trying to make the game safe for players, so that way they don't have as many issues with concussions or with CTE, much like back in the early days when it first started to become a problem. The NFL is doing all they can to make sure that they're taking advantage of trying to protect its players, but also punishing the ones as well. The problem is there's just been inconsistencies. You got players that are getting away with being suspended for 1 game because of an egregious hit and not being, sitting out for 2 games as well. Then there's all these other issues that the NFL has had to deal with when it comes to fines, when it comes to money and game checks being lost. I mean, it's almost as if the NFL is robbing the players that are doing all they can to make sure that they're performing to get the revenue to make the NFL a successful league as it already is, but at the same time, it's costing them some massive game checks after the games they play, which is preventing them from making the money so they can, have to help out their families, with their houses and trying to pay some bills and all that. I mean, it's a game, it's a child's game, but the players are making money, and for them not to be able to get the game check, it's like losing the egregious amount of money, like massive fines. I'm talking over $50,000 for something here. Now, I mean, I don't really know. And this is definitely going to cost a lot of money for Al-Shair, who has been suspended for 3 games as of now. Now, let me say this. He will be appealing this suspension. So there is still a chance that suspension, the 3-game suspension, can be reduced to 2 games. And that's something that I hope happens here as well, because I felt like it should have been a 2-game suspension to start with, and I think it's probably going to be that way. But again, we just don't really know what to think about this as well. But I mean, you're talking about Azeez Al-Shair and the fact that he got criticized by John Runyan, who was trying to make a professional statement, but at some point to attack the lack of respect and lack of sportsmanship, that is absolutely ludicrous and insane. In fact, I'm watching all these other media experts trying to see if there was anybody that defends Azeez Al-Shair, and there have been a couple that have caught my attention. Marcus Spears, who is currently on NFL on ESPN, or NFL Countdown on ESPN. He was on the show, and he's a former NFL player himself, and he basically had this to say. He doesn't necessarily agree with what Al-Shair did, but this is what he had to say about the whole situation.
Address something that's in that statement. The part about the lack of respect, that's heavy to cast the dispersion on this guy. When you talk about lack of respect for the game of football and all those who play, coach, and enjoy watching it, I hate that from John Runyan. Can we discipline him? Absolutely. But I don't think he has a lack of respect for the game or the people that play it. And I'm going to go by what people say who's played with Azeez. I'm going to go by what people who have coached him says. Does he have a history of doing things? Absolutely. But I don't believe it needed to be that type of energy drawn towards him personally when it comes to this situation. Listen.
It's so terrible. Like, I mean, the fact that you have an executive in the NFL saying something in a bad way. And I feel like that comment that was made, by John Runyan, again, we talk about the thing that's really the embarrassing one. That's the most frustrating part. Like, a lot of Texans fans are very upset about the fact that he got suspended by 3 games as well. But there's more anger and more upset over the fact that that statement was made, because clearly that is not true. Now, I don't know Al-Shair personally. I know he's had a history of that stuff, and a lot of people are going to look back and say, well, he's done this, he's caused some controversy, it's in everything, yada, yada, yada. Listen, you are not in a locker room. You don't play football. Until you have an opportunity to, sit in a locker room, talk to this guy, be on the same field with him, you might as well just do yourself a favor and just shut the hell up. It is not helping. I don't know this personally, and if this is the kind of thing that happens again, you could say, told you so. Well, don't say told you so, because that makes you look like you're smarter than you actually are. And look, again, I don't know the guy personally. I'm not saying that I believe that he was, he's entirely innocent here, because he made a bad mistake. He made a bad choice. And that's what really is making me very upset and making me angry in the whole matter as well. But then there's more people that are talking about this play, but specifically how the defense is in a lose-lose situation here. And I was listening to some comments about that as well. Here is Mark Schroeff, a former offensive lineman, talking about the play in particular, and he gives out his opinion on what should a defender do in a situation like this, because it just seems as if this rule about quarterbacks trying to slide in everything is a massive problem. So therefore, this is what Mark Schroeff had to say about the play itself and what needs to be done and everything. So here's what he had to say.
I look at this and I sit there and say, well, okay, then let's stop letting quarterbacks run with the football. Because that's a designed run call on a 2nd down and 7. You get him outside the pocket. He is a runner at that point. He is a runner who is unprotected. And all of a sudden, there's a late slide. I mean, if you look at it, like, what is Al-Shair supposed to do? Like, you're sitting there, you're going, okay, here it is. I'm defending the 1st down. He's going at the top of the numbers right here. He's still a runner. He's still a runner. What do you want me to do now? Just let him get the 1st down? Is that what I'm supposed to do as a defender? No. And so all of a sudden you're saying, okay, I'm committed. Then he starts to slide late. Like, to me, the quarterback brings that on himself, and then you see right there. So like, now what are we supposed to do?
Let's take that.
Right. Like
I thought he would be suspended because of the fight and because of, frankly, the fencing response. It's tough to watch a guy get hit and his arm spasm out. What we know about CTE and all of that. So I am not surprised he was suspended. 3 games doesn't surprise me.
I did too his first game back.
Yeah.
And we talked about the fencing response. Now, he's been through all kinds of neurologists and all those things. And he said that his neurologist told him that is not necessarily indicative of the severity of a concussion.
It's how the guy reacts.
It's just how you react individually to that. So
I'm just saying.
I understand that it looks bad.
Correct.
But again, that's not one where, like, to me, you're finding it based upon the look.
I mean, he's basically saying, what is a defender supposed to do? Like, as a defender, your job is to make sure that the quarterback does not get the 1st down. And it's really hard because this rule that quarterbacks have to slide in order to, give themselves up before the play starts and everything. And there is a tendency for some of these quarterbacks to slide a little later. They want to pick up a couple more yards and before they slide, and that unfortunately puts themselves in a very bad situation. Now, I'm not saying that Trevor Lawrence, I'm not saying it's entirely his fault, but he does have to get a little bit of blame here. I hate the fact that he got injured. I know that he's going to be doing okay. I hope he gets better real soon, but in some ways, I feel like the NFL needs to do a better job. Like, yeah, you want to protect the quarterback. That's the most important position in the NFL at the moment. But at the same time, I honestly feel like you're giving the defense a little less of an opportunity. It's a no-win situation for them because the defender in that situation, he has to make a decision. When is he going to slide? When am I going to commit? Because technically speaking, those decisions could be made at the wrong time. If Al-Shair decides to let Trevor Lawrence get the 1st down because he's afraid of, getting himself in trouble because he could hit Lawrence the way he did and he could get ejected, fans are going to be wondering, why didn't you stop Lawrence on that 1st down play? And then, of course, you get the explanation, and then that'd be sort of a cowardly response. But then again, there's what happened. If he makes a hit like that, which he did, he's going to get himself in trouble. The NFL really is not doing themselves any favor by just protecting the quarterbacks. Or they also got to be mindful of the fact that the linebackers, their job is to try to prevent the players from going down, like from getting the big yards or getting the 1st down. That doesn't necessarily mean that you do it the way you did. And I'm not necessarily saying that Trevor Lawrence is entirely at fault here. But what I am saying is that the fact is the defense is in a no-win situation here, as I said. And I think it's really upsetting and unfortunate because it's making a lot of people wonder, how in the world are you basically saying, like, how in the world can a defender play the game of football? It's so confusing. Like, players are now becoming more mindful, and they'll be a little bit more timid because they don't want to make a mistake and get themselves ejected or suspended like what's happening here. Now, obviously, when it comes to quarterback play, perhaps no one knows that position more than the greatest quarterback of all time, Tom Brady. He was on the Colin Cowherd show, and I don't necessarily watch Colin Cowherd as much, but Tom Brady definitely had a very good take on the situation. and why it's very important that quarterbacks need to be mindful about where they are at this stage and need to slide early on. He even brought up an experience that happened early on in his career.
I've obviously been a part of the NFL for a long time, and I remember there was an instance. I'll start by saying there's mixed emotions that I have about it as well. I remember in 2001, I think we played at Buffalo, and I slid late, and Nate Clements was the corner for the Bills, and he came up out of the secondary and absolutely crushed me. My helmet went flying off, and I got back and I ran to the huddle, and I had a lot of teammates that came up to me the next day and said, dude, these guys are coming. You got to get rid of that football. And if you're going to slide, you better get down. These guys are coming to get you. And it was a great kind of learning experience for me because I realized that when I'm out of that pocket, things were moving a lot faster for me. And the defense is trying to be very aggressive. And over time, the NFL has obviously done a lot of things to, protect players and player health and safety. It's been on and on and on. And the only aspect that I think is very challenging, and certainly for Trevor Lawrence, nobody wants to see anybody get hurt, but it is also the reality of a very physical sport that we play.
Yeah.
But the only way defensive players have to be aggressive. That's their nature. I always try to be aggressive on offense. We try to block aggressively. And at the same time, the defense tries to tackle aggressively. So I don't know. There's an aspect to me that I think the quarterbacks and certainly the quarterbacks need to take better care of themselves. I see Josh Allen running a lot.
He goes right into all the players, quarterbacks specifically, that run a lot as well. And look, there are some mobile quarterbacks in the NFL. You think about Lamar Jackson. You think about Josh Allen. Patrick Mahomes might have a few plays where he ran around as well. Then back in the early days, when you think about a guy like Michael Vick, who was a great mobile player, like dynamic player for the Atlanta Falcons before he got himself in trouble and then had to kind of take a little time away before he got back and played with the Philadelphia Eagles in a sense. And then obviously with Robert Griffin III, who was another great running quarterback before he got injured. And it's just unfortunate with how his career ended up being. But the thing about it is, look, quarterback scrambles can happen, but it's often seen as the last resort. If there's nobody open, then they have to take off and make something out of it. And even if, once they start running, they have to be mindful of the fact that they are no longer, they're in a very bad position. They have to be careful because there's going to be players that are going to try to hit them. So therefore, you have to be mindful of the fact that, okay, there's a defender right here. I can either pick up another couple of yards and then slide. Well, that sometimes can be a little bit tricky because those extra yards could cause you some massive trouble. And again, the defense, they have to be very mindful and be very careful, but at the same time, they're going to be aggressive. They're going to be in a mindset of, I have to stop him from getting more yards and making this big play to keep him out of the end zone. But, while at the same time making sure he doesn't get hurt. And that's where I think there's a problem. Quarterbacks are expected to slide, but some of them slide a little later than normal, and that unfortunately gets themselves in some very bad situations. Now, ultimately, I do think it's really unfortunate that it happened because at the end of the day, the best thing about this is that we found out that Trevor Lawrence is going to be okay, and I'm glad he's going to be fine. And it's really unfortunate that this, suspension has to happen. But at the same time, the things that I'm really disappointed with this whole suspension is, number one, the way the announcement, the press release was worded by John Runyan, who, again, no saint himself. He's definitely had his... he's definitely been a dirty player when he played in the NFL. And I'm sure looking back on it, he thinks, man, I wish I wasn't that way, but I had to be as aggressive as I can be, helping my teammates win. And look, at this point, I really hope that they can reduce that down to 2 games at least, because I feel like that's exactly what it should be. And I think from a lot of people, a lot of football experts, the suspension, it's a little harsh. It's just too harsh. And I think it's definitely a bad message that's being sent to the NFL, especially when it comes to suspensions for players. I think in this particular case, you could say it should be a 3-week suspension because the Texans are off this week. Then they have a bye. Then they have the next 2 games against 2 really good teams in the tough gauntlet of games that are coming up as well. So at the end of the day, it is what it is. Al-Shair suspended for 3 games pending the appeal, and we might know whether or not that's been reduced down to 2 or 3 games as well. But either way, it's a big loss for the Texans on the defensive side, because this was a guy that was affected by, that was named the captain, and certainly missed some time out because of an injury. He comes back, and then of course, what can you do? And it's just really sad, and it's unfortunate that this has happened. And certainly you hope that when he does get back, which as of now would be in a final week against Tennessee, potentially a game where the Texans could clinch a playoff spot. Ultimately, you got to go. You just have to deal with it, and this is something that you hope it's a learning experience for everybody. But man, talk about being a Houston fan. I mean, there's obviously a lot of Texans fans that are taking this very personally. It's Houston versus everybody again, just like it was with the Stros, just like it's been with the Rockets, the Texans. And I'll tell you what, for those that try, guess what? You are going to lose if you go with a Houston, if you go anti-Houston. And as Will Anderson Jr. says, if they ain't with Houston, then bleep them. You know what the word is as well. So at the end of the day, it is what it is. And certainly you're going to have to, overcome that from the Texas perspective. But I just figured I'd come out here, give out my thoughts about the rant, and talk about some viewpoints that I have seen from other experts in the NFL, or players that play in the NFL, and certainly hope that, when all is said and done, that Trevor Lawrence can come back to playing football, and that Al-Shair learns from his mistake, and then we can just carry onward. But again, the NFL really needs to do a better job with wording out their press releases to make sure that it doesn't appear that it's an attack on the player, when the player, even though he's had some questionable moments in the past, has not displayed, from what we've heard, has not displayed anything that is very violent in nature or very negative towards the franchise. And B, you need to make sure that you are consistent with your suspensions. Now, what's that going to take? 1 game or 2 games, depending on the severity of it? Okay, but 3 games, I don't think all the questionable things should have been considered. This is about one issue. This is about an issue that should take place. At the end of the day, you just got to deal with it. And I'm not saying, I hate it. I mean, I knew he was going to get suspended, but I just think this whole thing is just becoming a bit of a joke from the NFL. Like, if I were a Jaguars fan, I understand. I would be very happy and, excited, but also kind of relieved to know that Trevor Lawrence is okay. And I'm not saying that they are wrong for feeling the way that they do, but I just question the NFL's integrity. But the thing is, I worry about what a Jaguars defender would have done if the quarterback were, say, Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes in that situation. What if happens to the players? How would the Jaguars fans feel? They might get 3 games themselves. So, again, it's one of those things where I'm very upset about the way this whole thing has happened from a hit perspective, but also with the fact that this whole suspension could have been dealt with very well. And we'll see what happens with the appeal. So we'll just have to wait on that as well. Now, I'm going to end this podcast with giving out my predictions for Week 14 of this season. And there are 6 teams that are on a bye: the Broncos, the Colts, the Commanders, the Patriots, Ravens, and Texans. So I believe these are the last 6 teams that have yet to have a bye. And I talked a little bit about this on my last podcast, where there should be, if the NFL decides to go 18 games, every team needs to have 2 bye weeks. So we'll see how that plays out. So Denver, Indianapolis, Washington, New England, Baltimore, and Houston are out this week. So now, with that being said, let's take a look. By the way, before we do, I went 7-6 in my the previous week in Week 12. Then, of course, Week 13, I was almost perfect. The only game I didn't get right was Jacksonville and Houston, but I figured, you know what? I'm getting sick and tired of picking against my teams and having been undefeated at this point. The previous week, I picked the Texans to beat the Titans, and of course that didn't work out. So I figured I'd go ahead, pick Jacksonville to beat Houston, hoping that Houston does win, so I would therefore putting into the undefeated mark whenever I win against the Texans. And, well, I should have known. I probably should have picked Houston because everybody else, the teams that I picked, won their games. So, yeah, nice job, man. Nice job. So, at this point, my record, of course, is 132-63. So I am off to a I'm still continuing to have a good year when it comes to predictions. So just had to double check my record at this stage. Anyways, now we go to week 14, and I'm going to do it this real quick. First up, we got a big matchup on Thursday with Detroit and Green Bay, divisional leaders. I mean, Detroit, in my opinion, playing the best football at this stage. And I don't know, if Green Bay will be able to stop them, especially since the game's in Detroit. So I think Detroit's going to take this one to start things off. Pittsburgh and Cleveland. Cleveland had a really good game against Denver, even though they lost. A great performance by Jameis Winston. I think he's going to keep the momentum going. But I think the Steelers are looking for a little bit of revenge against Cleveland after they lost a couple of weeks ago. And I think Pittsburgh will be able to maintain that. So just barely a tight game, but I got Pittsburgh winning that one against Cleveland. You have the New York Giants and the New Orleans Saints, and that's going to be an interesting one. The Giants no longer have Daniel Jones to worry about. Saints are still struggling, and I don't know why I'm picking this, but I'm going to go ahead and say that the New York Giants will beat the New Orleans Saints to keep the momentum, keep some momentum going, whatever momentum they have. I don't know if there's ever such a thing as momentum with the New York Giants in a way. Next up, we have the Miami Dolphins and the New Jersey. I was about to say New Jersey Jets. I mean, it's funny. They should be in New Jersey, the New Jersey Jets, not New York. Both the Giants and the Jets play in New Jersey, okay? So here's the thing. One of these two teams has to be the New Jersey Giants or the New Jersey Jets, depending on, how the season goes out. Whoever is the worst team of the two has to be the New Jersey Giants or the Jets. And, I think the Giants are probably the worst team at this moment. So even though I did pick them to win win the game, I think they're in position now to be, they're definitely in position to be the worst of the New York teams. So they should be the New Jersey Giants for next year, and I think that should be a recurring theme. But anyway, Miami and the New York Jets, I got Miami winning that one. I think the Dolphins will carry the momentum here. Jacksonville and Tennessee, I really was impressed with Mac Jones for leading the Jaguars to somewhat of a comeback against the Texans. I think Jacksonville is going to be motivated and fired up after the tough loss last week. It hasn't been a really great year. I'm going to give them a victory over Tennessee just for a good measure. Minnesota and Atlanta, I think the Vikings are still like one of the most slept-on teams in all the NFC. I mean, obviously they're in the same division with Detroit. They're only down by a game. Minnesota is 10-2. The Lions are 11-1. I think it's going to be Minnesota who gets the win there. You got Philadelphia and Carolina. I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles are probably going to be putting themselves in an NFC Championship showdown, possibly with the Lions. But, I mean, Bryce Young has definitely gotten better at this stage. And at the end of the day, I think Philadelphia is going to get themselves the W out of this one. Tampa Bay and Las Vegas. I mean, Tampa Bay, tough win over the Carolina Panthers last week. I think they keep the momentum, beating the Raiders. Then we have Arizona and Seattle. Arizona, I've been really impressed, just, keeping an eye on them. They're sort of like an under-the-radar team, but, again, they have lost the last couple of weeks going up against a Seattle team who currently has the division lead by one game. So this is a battle for first place in the division. And I think Arizona is going to be fine. I think they'll get themselves back to being in first place and looking to carry the momentum there. San Francisco and the Chicago Bears. The 49ers, unfortunately, are without Christian McCaffrey, but I think San Francisco should still have enough, barely enough weapons to get themselves past a Chicago Bears team that has been struggling, especially with Caleb Williams at the quarterback position. So I'm going to give the 49ers the advantage. Buffalo Bills and the Los Angeles Rams. I mean, there's no question Buffalo is probably the best team in the AFC at the moment. Josh Allen playing lights-out football for the Bills. He's definitely having himself a great stretch. He got engaged to Haley Stanfield, the actress, who has been in a number of shows, so I want to congratulate Mr. Josh Allen for being lucky and finding a girl that is an actress but also loves football. I mean, yeah, I definitely would want to see a little bit of a rematch in the Bills and the Chiefs if that were to happen there. But Josh Allen has that going for him. He also has been the first quarterback to throw a touchdown pass, rush a touchdown pass, and catch a touchdown pass in the same game. So that's a historical achievement. I think he's the favorite to win the MVP at the moment. So we'll see what happens there. I'm going to give Buffalo the win over the Rams. And then we have the Chargers and the Chiefs. Now, this is kind of the thing with the Kansas City Chiefs. I feel like even though they are the best team in the West at this moment with a 3-game lead, I can't really say that they are playing at the level that you expect them to play. And a lot of people are calling them frauds and such and all that. So this is a hard one for me. Whereas I think the Chargers are a threat to make a little bit of a run in the playoffs. And I think if this is a game the Chargers would like to win to close the gap and maybe make a statement that, hey, the Chiefs might not be as strong as they are in years past. So I'm not entirely sold on Kansas City, being 11-1 despite the way they've been playing. But I still think Kansas City will have themselves some momentum. However, for this occasion, I'm going to do a little bit of a surprise. I'm picking the Chargers to knock off an upset. I would not be surprised if Kansas City wins, but I just think with Jim Harbaugh looking to get a little revenge on Patrick Mahomes and company, it should be a big game for the Chargers as well. And then, of course, the Monday Night Football game, Dallas and Cincinnati. Now, I was in Dallas a couple of weeks ago, and, might have done a little one too many times mocking them as well. But, of course, the Cowboys did get the win in their last game on Thanksgiving, so they are no longer winless at home for the season. And now I can honestly say that I think Dallas might be able to pull out a big victory over Cincinnati. And the Bengals are just really struggling. I just don't know what's going on in that sense. So I think this is a game that if Dallas wants to get back into contention for the playoffs, they should be able to win. And I think they're going to take this one against Cincinnati. So my winners for Week 14, Detroit, Pittsburgh, the New York Giants, the Miami Dolphins, Jacksonville, Minnesota, Philadelphia, Tampa Bay, Arizona, San Francisco, Buffalo, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the Cowboys of Dallas. So that is how I see Week 14 of this NFL season going on as well. And folks, that is going to wrap things up here for my latest on this podcast. I apologize for the emergency podcast around here. I don't know if I'm going to be doing another one later this week, but hopefully I have one sometime in the future, maybe next week as well. But again, as always, I do want to thank you guys for listening in. Let me know what you think about the whole Al-Shair suspension. Was it right? Was it harsh? I mean, just let me know. I know there's people that are probably on both sides of the spectrum, whether they agree that it's fair or disagree that it's very harsh. I mean, you never know what to expect. But anyways, folks, I think this is going to be a real interesting podcast to release. You can listen to this podcast on Spotify and Podbean, and I also publish this on my YouTube channel. So, folks, be on the lookout for that on KWCLINE 91. And I hope you guys have yourselves a great day, and I will see you next time for another episode of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock.